Iran. Now we had to. Let's hope there's a real deal on the table.
Yeah, I would love to see negotiations continue as well. And I think on this UN nuclear watchdog report, it's a little confusing because just a couple of days before this latest interview, where he talks about the 3 month uh, timeline for when Iran could start enriching uranium again, he gave an interview earlier where he talks about significant damage, saying that it's a fairly accurate technical conclusion that they could have set the nuclear program back perhaps decades. Depends on what activity you're talking about. It will be much more difficult for Iran to continue at the same pace as before, and these are all from the same Rafael Grossi. So I'm a little confused as to why he's giving two separate assessments. But that being said, I think most of the intelligence we've received has said that they were set back by probably a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, which seems most reasonable to me. Your point about the institutional knowledge is important because Israel, of course, followed up with strikes on a lot of the scientists. So the question is, how many did they get? Do they still have the ability to quickly ramp up this uranium production like they were doing before? But it was my understanding during the JCPOA that they were regularly violating the agreement and had been paying off inspectors. And I mean, all of that was publicly reported by American media. So I was a little confused by your claim there.
Yeah. No, I'm following what the IAEA is saying, and I think on top of that, what's happening right now is, to your point about what the Secretary General is saying, like clearly there was damage done.
Right.
Clearly they're delayed. I think the time horizon you mentioned, like 1 to 3 years, like seems reasonable based on what we've seen in terms of the amount their nuclear capacity has been delayed. But at the same time, this sort of rhetoric that has been completely obliterated and destroyed, which is what he's pushing back against, is the Trump comments on that, also seems to make sense because again, you can't bomb your way to a solution here.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fordo was obliterated, but the nuclear program wasn't because
Right.
they obviously had moved some of their uranium and they have other sites available and whatnot, and so on and so forth. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, I mean, the negotiations are going to be the big thing here. And is Trump? I mean, one of the other elements of this is Israel, right? Is Trump going to be able to get Netanyahu to hold off while he attempts to resume negotiations, if he even decides to do that, because he said last week that he has halted negotiations with Iran because of their some of the demands that they've been asking for, the fact that Khamenei has come out and said that Iran won the war. I mean,
Right.
that obviously rankled Trump a lot. So it's not even clear, actually, at this point, if they will, in the immediate at least, go back to the negotiating table, which to me is an issue.
Right. I think Trump has tried to achieve greater negotiating leverage by doing this bombing. He clearly wasn't happy with the terms of debate that were happening earlier. We'll find out maybe a few years from now whether or not this actually increases his negotiating position. But I also think the MAGA wing of the party that said we were supposed to be anti-war. That was like a huge part of Trump coming to power, attracting a number of independent voters. Meanwhile, you had Democrats embracing Liz and Dick Cheney in the last election, something I completely opposed. That's not the foreign policy that I've signed up for. But now you're seeing Trump potentially getting influenced by the military-industrial complex and having a more forceful military intervention policy. I mean, you heard Tulsi Gabbard, his intelligence chief, talk all the time about we're not supposed to be doing regime change wars. Trump was potentially inching in that direction. So I think that real fissure in the MAGA base is what's probably prompting Trump to say, all right, we've done the bombing, now we're going to negotiate. The other part that's not talked about in all of this is the public sentiment of Iranians, which is Iranians, I think, when you see this kind of bombing, you see this kind of attack, it's the kind of thing that can unite people against the United States. So strategically speaking, I think we have to be very careful because the long-term vision here is to be able to normalize relations and bring Iran into the international community. This is not a war against the Iranian people, and ideally you want to be able to build those bridges in the future. The more bombing, the more military intervention we do, the less chance we have of that happening.
Yeah, I think most of the non-interventionist MAGA base would be happy if the bombing was all that happened and he was able to use that as leverage to get a significant deal done with Iran. But what they don't want to see, of course, is either boots on the ground or regime change. And when either Trump or Netanyahu talks publicly about regime change, what that signals to most Americans is we're going to be the ones cleaning up the mess.
Right.
And we're going to be the ones there for decades trying to restore peace to the area. That's what the base is really against.
Right. Well, as Trump always says, thank you for your attention to this matter.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, we have a lot more topics to talk about on Rising. Stick around. That's right after this.